Alright, it's going to be a fun show today. We're talking about one of my favorite authors as a kid growing up, Roald Dahl, and his latest book to be adapted for the big screen. No, not that one. His latest book to... No, they did that one already. They did that. They did that. They did that. Okay, forget the graphics. You know what? I'm talking about the BFG. Come on, guys. Get it together, alright? Just roll the intro.
From the old movies of 30 years ago and beyond,
to the world of the new films of the last 30 years.
To the movies that are now playing, this is Old, New, and Now Playing. And now, with his reviews and thoughts on movie news, here's your host, Will Robinson Smith.
Hey there everyone, and if this is your first time joining me, thank you so much for looking in. And if you're returning after our little week hiatus, thanks so much for coming back. I really appreciate it. I hope you had a good week. I certainly did. I got some things done with the show that I wanted to, still working on other things, so you'll see some changes over the next couple of weeks, some more improvements to the show, but shouldn't be anything too terribly major. But of course, one thing that's not going to change is how we get things rolling on this show with our movie news segment, The Rundown.
Don't say it. Don't you say it.
Left.
Come on!
On today's rundown, we're talking sequels and then no sequels? I'll explain. Coming in first, as far as its theatrical movies go, Disney has never really been one for sequels, with the exception of Rescuers Down Under and Fantasia 2000, of course. But the studio has been working on a sequel to the 2012 film Wreck-It Ralph since shortly after it came out, to great critical and fan praise. This week, Disney made it official with the announcement of the movie's release date of March 9th, 2018. Director Rich Moore is set to come back to the project, along with John C. Reilly reprising his role as Ralph. Not many details are available just yet, but Collider reports that the movie will take place in present day, will have more of a nod to internet gaming, and may include a Tron reference. Moore's latest directorial project was this year's Zootopia, which I really loved. I thought it was a great film, and apparently a lot of you out there loved it too, since it did cross the $1 billion mark before leaving theaters. And so I'm pretty confident in this project. Obviously, having Moore return to this world that he knows really well is always a good thing. Having John C. Reilly come back on as Ralph, I loved his voiceover work in that. And so I think there's a lot that can come out of this world. It seemed like they created a nice universe for Ralph and the other characters in this space. And so I think a sequel is definitely warranted. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope it's as good, at least, as the first one. But hopefully we'll see a trailer sometime in the next 6 months to a year, and we'll just have to look forward to 2018 to see that. And our other story for today revolves around Pixar sequels. Obviously, we just got Finding Dory last weekend, and it did really well at the box office and may top the box office again this weekend. And 3 of the next 4 Pixar movies are going to be sequels, which include Cars 3 in June of 2017, Toy Story 4 in June of 2018, and The Incredibles 2 in June of 2019. However, according to Entertainment Weekly, that's where the sequel train stops, at least for the foreseeable future. In talking with EW, Pixar president Jim Morris said that their plans for sequels is based on the filmmakers of the original movie, and if he or she doesn't have a solid idea for the sequel, Pixar won't jump on it. Morris went on to say that the fact that we're getting several sequels so close to one another can be chalked up to a scheduling byproduct. He said, "Our plan had been to make an original every year and a sequel every other year, if the idea came forth to do it. If we add the next films after the current ones, it actually comes out to that. 7 sequels and a spate of 21 originals from the time we were acquired by Disney in 2006. So it's just penciled out to be the same portfolio, just not in the order we thought they would be." With the exception of Cars 2, I've generally liked most of Pixar's sequels. Obviously, most of all, the Toy Story sequels and Finding Dory, which we just got this past weekend. But I think where Pixar really shows its strength and its meat and potatoes, certainly for its business model, I think is with its original content. So I'm excited to hear that they're going to be focusing a lot more on that. Unfortunately, that's not going to be until 2020 and later. But I think the slate of sequels that we are going to get in the next few years are really exciting. I'm curious about Toy Story 4. I'm not entirely sold on the premise yet, but Incredibles 2, Yes, please sign me up. Cannot wait until 2019. But guys, now that we're all caught up on the news, let's head straight into our main segment, your feature presentation. The BFG is based on the book of the same name by Roald Dahl and is directed by Steven Spielberg. The book was first published in 1982 and tells the story about a young girl named Sophie. She happens to be awake yet again at 3 o'clock in the morning when she spots a giant sneaking about London. He sees her as well and decides to whisk her off to giant country. But she's not really safe there because all of the other giants eat humans and have been snatching them away at night. So right off the bat, this movie had a trait that I really admire from other Steven Spielberg movies, which is that it doesn't give you a lot of exposition off the top of the movie. It just kind of says, here it is. Yes, we do get to hear some of Sophie's inner thoughts and monologues as we get introduced to the orphanage that she's in. But it's just basic setup of what she's thinking. It doesn't launch into a whole diatribe about what the orphanage is all about and what happened to her parents. That's not important. We don't need any of that. The movie doesn't give us any of that, which I think is great. And, I was talking with my brother about the intro to this movie, and he said, to him, he hadn't seen it at that point, but he said that he thought it sounded a lot like the way that Spielberg got us into Jurassic Park or Indiana Jones. And I said, yeah, it is a lot like those movies. And it kind of reminded me a bit of E.T. And this movie does have an E.T. vibe in a lot of ways. Partly the opening that I mentioned, of course, and partly there's a sense of wonder that Steven Spielberg is able to draw out of these movies. And that's due in part from his team. The movie brings back the creative forces behind E.T. in reuniting Steven Spielberg with Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall, who all have producer credits on the movie, according to The Hollywood Reporter. E.T. screenwriter Melissa Matheson was also brought on board to write this screenplay before she died last November. Spielberg has mentioned in interviews that this is his first directorial venture with Walt Disney Studios, but it's far from Disney's first time dipping into the well of author Roald Dahl. Disney fans, and certainly fans of Tim Burton and Henry Selick, remember the 1996 movie James and the Giant Peach, one of my favorites, which combined live action with the stop-motion animation we had come to love after seeing The Nightmare Before Christmas. However, many people may not know that Roald Dahl's first children's book, The Gremlins, which is about mischievous creatures who damaged Royal Air Force planes before joining the RAF, was published by Walt Disney Productions with the intent on being made into a movie, but never took off. But I digress. Bringing things back to the BFG, two things really stood out to me about this film. Number one, the John Williams score, obviously, and two, the great acting by the two principal leads. Ah, yes, there really isn't anything like a good John Williams score, is there? And per usual, his music really elevated the film. For over 40 years, Williams has scored every Spielberg movie, with the exception of 1985's The Color Purple and last year's Bridge of Spies. And while the score didn't feel instantly iconic, like a Raiders of the Lost Ark or a Star Wars, I feel like this is one that will grow on me the more I listen to it. Another thing Spielberg does really well, besides choosing good musical partners of course, is finding talent. Having just worked with Mark Rylance on Bridge of Spies, which got Rylance his first Academy Award, Spielberg was primed to get another great performance out of Rylance. I have to say, this guy was a wonderful match for the character of the BFG and really felt like the character I had read from so many years ago. It also helps that the CGI in this movie is really good and that the facial performance that Rylance gives is quite spectacular.
Ours hear in all the secret whisperings of the world.
The other main star of this movie is newcomer Ruby Barnhill. She plays the character of Sophie, who's a precocious little girl with a sense of adventure and curiosity that kind of reminded me of me when I was growing up. I thought that Barnhill did a really nice job of not only playing off of Rylance's BFG, but also maintained a sense of realism in an environment that heavily mixed CGI with practical sets. And while I really love the story that this movie is based on, I felt like it was almost two different movies at different points in time. What I mean is that on the one hand, you have the story of Sophie, who's this very grounded girl who's ripped out of her reality and thrust into the world of the fantastical and has to deal with that in a very practical way. But then on the other hand, you have a movie that doesn't take itself very seriously. It's silly, it's fun. But I felt like while those two things totally worked by themselves, it was when the movie tried to bridge between the two that things felt disjointed and it kind of took me out of the movie. For example, the fizzy drink that they consume, the the frobscottle, right? Good to have the book on hand. When they drink the frobscottle and there's a fart scene, it's funny and it works, but where it comes in and where it goes out, it felt almost out of place. And I know it's obviously a part of the lore of the book and it's part of the story, but I don't know, that didn't work for me. And there are a couple other moments that I think you'll see for yourself if you decide to see the movie. Overall though, there is a lot to like in this movie. It's a very faithful adaptation of the novel, but definitely takes liberties to change it to make it work as a movie, which is what a good adaptation should do. And kudos to whoever came up with the way that they manifested the appearance of dreams. That looked really good. I give the BFG an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed the movie, and it's certainly one that the whole family can enjoy, which is especially good as we head into this holiday weekend. So those are my thoughts on the BFG, but more importantly, I want to hear what you guys have to say about the movie, and what are some of your favorite Roald Dahl book-to-movie adaptations, or what are some of your favorite books that you would like to see made into a movie? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And guys, that will do it for today's episode of Old, New, and Now Playing. Please be sure to send in any movie-related questions you have before Monday's show. I'm going to get that ready pretty soon. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you want to stay up to date on everything we've got going on here, just go ahead and click that subscribe button to stay in on the ground floor of everything that's going to be coming up in the future of Old, New, and Now Playing. Guys, I hope you have a fun, relaxing, and safe 4th of July weekend. I'll see you on Monday.